All right. Hello and welcome everybody to KBO Chats Live. I'm Sam Pasco alongside Eric Halterman, and we are breaking down everything you need to know to bet some Korean baseball. We got a great show planned for you today. Check out the website below, rotowire.com/free KBO. Bear with us. It is having some technical difficulties, but when it is up, it is on point. Eric, I want to dive right in. Before we get to the best bets, we're talking about power rankings, getting a feel for where these teams are at coming into playoff time, and we're officially into makeup baseball. Your number one team is the NC Dinos, and we see here they had a mediocre 3-3 record last week. Are you worried about them, or are they just resting until the real playoffs happen?
Yeah, it seems like they don't really have much reason to push things at the moment. They've all but clinched a 5-ish game lead with 8 to play. Five games left, 8 to play for them. I think 5 to 7-ish for most of the teams trailing them. So it would take an 0-8 finish and somebody else going almost undefeated to knock them off the top spot. Certainly not playing the way they'd want to be heading into the postseason. But given the way the KBO playoff structure works, I kind of don't think their momentum matters too much because, again, the top 5 teams out of 10 make the playoffs. 4 plays 5 for the right to play 3. The winner of that plays 2, and the winner of that plays 1, who gets a bye all the way to the Korean series, which is all but guaranteed to be the Dinos at this point, which means they're going to have a couple-week break anyway. So I don't think it matters too much whether they close the season on a hot streak or not. Obviously, you'd feel a little bit more confident in them if they're playing well at the moment, and just 3-8 over the last 11 is not that at all. But I think they're pretty much on cruise control, so I wouldn't read too much into it.
All right, not too worried about that. In case you're just joining in, this is KBO Chats Live. You see the chat there popping, and we will get some top picks here. Josh and Barry, welcome on in. Some first-time viewers as well. Welcome in. We'll get to picks, but we do want to just give you a feel for where these teams are at right now, especially the playoff ones, as those are the important ones to take a look out for. So moving to number 2, the LG Twins. Casey Kelly, he's been excellent. He's your DFS name to know. But will he be enough coming down the stretch if Wilson and Ramos aren't good to go?
Yeah, it's real tight. I mean, they are half a game up on the Wiz and Heroes right behind them, a game and a half on the Bears, and every spot from 2 to 5 matters quite a bit in terms of whether or not you get a bye or multiple byes. And they've been a bit shaky, but nobody behind them has been all that good. Just 3-3 this past week for the Twins after being quite hot right before that. They've got a deep team. So they've been able to withstand quite a number of injuries throughout the year, and I think they'll withstand these just fine. But if Wilson can't pitch in the playoffs, that'll hurt a lot. You don't want to lose one of your 2 foreign starters, that's for sure, even though he hasn't been elite this year. And Roberto Ramos is pretty much the only guy not named Mel Rojas Jr. who was an MVP favorite at any point this year. So obviously even getting him back would be almost just as big. They have talent around him, Hyun Kim, former major leaguer, and a whole bunch of guys who hit pretty well, 5 guys with an OPS of 800 or better. But losing a guy like him, if they don't get him back for the playoffs, that would be quite huge. I think they'll be fine without him until then. Obviously, they've all but clinched as well, just like the next teams that we're about to talk to. But it'd be a huge, huge blow to not have him in the postseason.
We'll have to see. That could definitely cause them to do a little worse, as those guys have been the anchors, a lot of them, throughout different points in this season. Moving to number 3, the Kiwoom Heroes. Unusually, they have only 2 games left. It's weird just how the schedule, the rain out makeup schedule works. Are you worried maybe that they're going to get cold, or you think this is going to be a great opportunity for their aces who have both had injury troubles during this past season? Good chance for them to get rested and be even stronger heading into the playoffs.
Yeah, just 1 game a week for them the next 2 weeks because they play in the KBO's only dome, so they don't have very many rainouts to make up. Could definitely use a bit of a rest for those 2. They've been dominant throughout the year. I believe Jokic was not great his last time out, but 2 of those guys definitely in the top 10. Jokic has a very strong case as the best pitcher in the league this year. Not quite the elite strikeout numbers, but right up there at the top in ERA and WHIP for pretty much the entire season. So giving those 2 starters a break, I don't even know what they're going to do the last 2 games. They could throw both of them once. They could throw Jokic twice on a full week rest. I'm not entirely sure what they're going to do. But mostly they're just sitting at home and hoping the other teams don't pass them, which maybe not an ideal situation, but I think they'll be happy enough to get the rest. It's not like they're entering this time in much momentum either. They've been pretty shaky for several weeks. I did move them up 2 spots here, though, because they took 2 out of 3 from both the Wiz and the Bears, which is certainly a good sign because they're likely to play one or both of those teams in the playoffs.
All right, so that rest could do them some good, and they're ending strong at least a little bit here recently. Moving to number 4. Weird to say this, but the Deuce and Bears might be the dark horse right now. Offense back on track, as you note here, and they're pitching. Crazy to say Alcantara has an 18-2 record. That seems like a typo there, but hey, they win when he's on the mound, and they might be the most dangerous team outside the Dinos right now in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, they've made it to 5 straight Korean series, winning 3 of them. So if you put any stock in playoff experience, who knows how much that's just wishy-washy storyline stuff and how much it's real. But if it is real at all, nobody has anything close to what they have. Most of their lineup has been together through all 5 of those series. A lot of veterans in their early 30s, many of whom are about to become free agents. So this might be one last go for this core. And it looked like the pitching was going to hold him back throughout the year, but they've got Chris Flexon healthy again. They discovered one Hyung Choy in the middle of the season. When Flexon went down, he stepped into the rotation and was quite solid. So they've got that rotation depth now, and the pitching's just been great. The entire staff for the past 15 games, just 3.1 runs per game is some elite pitching. So that's definitely what you want to see. The lineup's been shaky at times down the stretch, but there's too much talent there. I think they'll be just fine come the playoffs. I think they've got a shot to beat anybody, even the Dinos.
Very interesting. The Last Dance, little MJ, little throwback there reference. We'll see what they can do with all that experience. Lastly, the Wiz, they don't have much experience in terms of actually getting to the playoffs. Will be their first playoff berth. Last 2 games for Mel Rojas Jr., 6 hits. I mean, Triple Crown guy, hopefully. Is he basically their entire offense in this team, or have we seen some other production, like from their pitching staff, a young rookie, perhaps?
Yeah, and they've got Jae-Gyun Hwang, former San Francisco Giant, and Baek-ho Gong, one of the best young sluggers in the KBO, surrounding Rojas in the lineup. So it's pretty strong core surrounding him. Rojas did move back into the Triple Crown lead. He's basically locked up homers and RBI. I think he's got He's got an 8-homer lead over Roberto Ramos, who's injured, and he's got a 17 RBI lead over Hyun-Soo Kim. So those are done. He's 1 point ahead of Asap San in batting average. So if the season ended today, he would have the Triple Crown. But there's 3 guys within 10 points of him. So definitely he's got something to play for down the stretch here. And Hyun-Jun So, as you mentioned, as I wrote there, rookie who looked like nothing early in the year, looked like he had no business pitching in the KBO, and then suddenly he hasn't had a bad start in any of his last 14. 13 of his last 14 starts, he's allowed 2 or fewer earned runs, and in the 14th, he allowed just 3. So he's incredibly stable. They don't necessarily have quite the aces that some of the teams around them have in the postseason, so that could hurt. I think even their best starters, William Cuevas, Odrisamer Despaigne, aren't quite lockdown arms like you see with Alcantara, Eric Jokic, guys like that. But they should be able to stay in games, and Mel Rojas Jr. can hit a 3-run homer in any day. So I wouldn't put them as big underdogs in any series, though I do have them bottom of the 5 playoff teams at this point.
All right. That's fair. Right, like you see there, 6-6 recently. So we'll see what they can do as they face off against the LG Twins. These stats, as of right now, will be courtesy of my KBO stats. Big thank you to them, as our site is currently undergoing some technical difficulties. This game, let's take a look at the slip here. LG, KT can draw on this. Here we go. Wiz, they are the favorites here. They got Jisong Bae going. He's been actually pretty impressive, just 4 total runs in his last 3 starts. The walks are still an issue, but he hasn't allowed a home run since September 18th. What do you think about Jisong Bae? Is he your Bae tonight? You liking what he's doing against the LG Twins?
I don't know if I'd go that far with him. He does have 2 or fewer earned runs in 6 straight starts, which sounds great. But then you notice less than 4 innings in his last start. Not exactly a very good one there against the Heroes. And if you look at those strikeout and walk numbers, in those 6 starts, 13 strikeouts against 20 walks is not close to good. Yet he somehow has a 2.01 ERA. So it's been a lot of, I think, every batted ball is finding a fielder's glove at this point. Just too many walks that once those singles start falling in, I think he's going to start giving up runs. Again, in his last 10 starts, he's only once struck out more batters than he walked. Obviously, there's more to pitching than just those things. But with certain guys, when it's that extreme, you start to worry. Over the course of the season, it's a 13.2% strikeout rate compared to a 12.3% walk rate. So barely more strikeouts than walks over the course of the year. He hasn't been totally punished for it. And he was pretty good last year, though. His strikeout numbers, strikeout to walk ratio was stronger. So it was perhaps more legitimate. So I just don't see the underlying numbers supporting the runs he's been giving up. But again, he's done it for several now. It's certainly possible he does it for one more, but he doesn't seem to be doing things in a sustainable way at all.
All right, so not too high on Bay. Turning our attention over to the LG Twins. They got Lim going for them tonight/tomorrow morning. He never had an ERA under 4 in his entire KBO career, but yet his last 2 starts have been amazing. Was it 12 strikeouts against just 3 walks? That is, of course, following a pretty rough stretch of allowing 3 or more runs in 4 straight. So I can't imagine you're too optimistic on him, but at least he's showing some signs that he maybe could be a quality guy that goes 7 strong innings.
Yeah, I mean, he was a second overall pick way back in 2011, so he was supposed to be good. He just hasn't necessarily put things together. He's been pretty good at times this year, but this is certainly one of the best stretches. Granted, he's facing the Lions and Giants in the last 2, not exactly the stiffest competition, but some pretty dominant outings, 12 strikeouts against just 3 walks, 12 hits, and only 1 earned run over those 2 starts. On the season overall, he's been a pretty high strikeout guy, 21.4%, as 4 ticks or so above league average, because there's a lot fewer strikeouts over in Korea. But he walks too many guys, 10.1%. On the whole, that's sort of a mid-rotation starter, nothing elite, but does more or less backs up an ERA in the 4s. So I think I'd be fine treating him as a pretty decent starter. He's got the 4th best ERA among the Twins' healthy starters at the moment, which gives a sense for how they're able to withstand losses to guys like Tyler Wilson, is that they've got enough guys who are at least acceptable. So I think he's not bad at all. I think he's got a chance to keep these whiz bats quiet. Not that anybody can really keep Mel Rojas quiet at this point.
That is very true. Taking a look at the odds here, courtesy of FanDuel Sportsbook, total is set at 10.5. The Wiz, their last 2 games, they've been scoring 6.5. The 2 before that, they were averaging just a half run, while the Twins, they're on a 3-game streak of scoring 6+, but they were shut out yesterday. What are we feeling with the pick and the total here?
I am actually going to side Twins here. I don't think it's a super clear one, but I think Lim's underlying numbers more or less support his ERA of 4. Bay has more or less the same ERA, but just really shaky strikeout to walk numbers. I just don't see him continuing to keep runs off the board with a strikeout to walk ratio just that bad. And the Twins have plenty of bats, even without Roberto Ramos. Hyun Kim would lead, 6 or 7 lineups around the league. He'd be their best hitter. So I think they have enough to get it done there. I don't agree with the Wiz being the favorites here, though it is pretty close to a toss-up.
And then 10 runs, that's the total here. Which way are you going to go?
Neither pitcher's dominant, even if they're both decent, and both lineups are pretty good. So I think I'll go over here.
All right, like the over here. Next game, we have the NC Dinos against the Kia Tigers. We got, first with the Dinos, Song going for them. He was a first-round pick, 7th overall, just last year, 2019. Has been pretty limited just to a relief role this year, up until about, July, August. And he's been actually pretty decent from a starting pitching capacity, limited to just 3 hits, actually. And limiting runs in a pretty good amount. What do we feel about Song tonight?
Yeah, in his 10 starts, he's allowed more than 3 runs just once, so that's pretty good, though he's typically not going all that deep into games, as you see there. He's only once gone more than 5, so wouldn't expect a very long outing from him, and generally a pretty mediocre one. His last 4 starts, though, has been all pretty much quite good. An ERA of 3 and a whip of 114 in his last 4. 18 strikeouts against 11 walks is not all that exciting, but it's not terrible. So it seems like he's got the pedigree of a decent enough starter, even though he's only been a starter for 10 games or so. He's got a strikeout rate of about 19.5%, which is solidly above average, but a few too many walks, 10.7%. And again, that's with spending much of the year in relief, so you'd expect him to be slightly worse in the rotation, which he has been. So not a shutdown arm here, but a capable enough starter. Could get the job done against a pretty weak Tigers offense. Tigers do still have something to play for, but they're 5.5 games out of the playoffs here, so it's not quite all but clinched, but I think the magic number for the Bears is sitting at 3. So the Tigers could be officially out of it in just a couple days. So I'm not sure if that leaves them extra motivated until Wednesday or so, or if they've all but given up. Even if they haven't given up, though, again, not a ton of talent on that lineup outside of Hyung Choy and Preston Tucker, who have been quite good.
Yeah, nothing crazy. And their pitcher tonight has not been anything great. Jang, what do we say? Former NC Dino. Never had an ERA lower than 4.61. Another relief pitcher. I don't think they're going to turn him into a starter now. I think this might just be a bullpen game. Should we expect a lot of runs, especially with this NC Dinos lineup, being able to put up 11 on basically any given night?
Yeah, I am not expecting much for a performance from Hyun Jang here. He was a Dino until the middle of this season, traded in mid-August in a deal that sent Kyung Chang Moon, who was the Tigers closer last year, was struggling early this year, and has not been a shutdown arm in the Dinos bullpen either. So traded in the middle of the year, hasn't set the world on fire for his new team either. He's making just his second start of the year. He allowed 4 runs in 2 1/3 innings to the Wiz back in late September. So no indication that he is suddenly far better as a starter. He's topped out at 2 innings and 45 pitches since his last start. So no reason to believe he'll go deep in this one. The Dinos probably wish he would go deep in this one because he's got an ERA of about 9.5 and a whip of almost 2. So I think the Dinos will enjoy themselves for an inning-ish until they get into the soft underbelly of the Tigers bullpen, which also probably shouldn't be that tough for them. So I'm expecting quite a few runs for the Dinos here.
That's what we're looking at here. 10.5 runs in this one. The Dinos, the last time they played the Tigers in their last 2, they put up a total of 19 runs. So I would think, this could be a big over and an easy Dinos victory, especially with Song being actually a pretty decent former first rounder.
Yep, that's where I'm at too. If Song was a true shutdown arm, maybe you'd think that this is like an 8-1 that ends up as an under, but I don't think he's that. I think the Tigers will score some runs off him. I think the Dinos are going to score quite a few off their former reliever here.
All right, that's what we're looking at with the NC Dinos Kia Tigers matchup. Moving on to the Deucin Bears and the Lotte Giants matchup. 2 former major leaguers going at it, Chris Flexon and Adrian Sampson. Flexon, a guy you like a lot. And one thing that I think is really encouraging is that he's going deep into games. That was the biggest concern, his injury. Was he going to be playing in games? And now look at us here. What, 6 innings, 7 innings, 5, 7, 6. He's going deep into games, which is really great when you consider that he's also striking out a ton of guys, 40 in his last 31 innings pitched, with a 13 strikeout performance against the Bears' rivals, the Eagles, back on the 22nd of September. I got to think, with Flex on the mound, this might be a great spot to go with the Bears, and maybe he goes 8 innings tonight.
Yeah, Flexon, he's been really good since coming back from that broken foot. In 7 starts, he's allowed more than 2 earned runs just once. He's got a 2.77 ERA, a whip of exactly 1. Since his return, 51 strikeouts in 39 innings against just 9 walks. He's done everything you want from him in those 7 starts. He looks good enough to be an ace for many teams. If you look at his strikeout and walk numbers on the season, 25.8% strikeout rate versus a 7.0% walk rate is a near match for Dan Straley of the Giants, who's not going in this one. But Straley definitely has a case as the best pitcher in the KBO. His strikeout rate's 26%, so just 0.2% better, and his walk rate's 6.5%, so 0.5% better. So Flexon has been, at least in those two underlying numbers, which again, not the whole picture, but tell us a lot. He's been practically Dan Straley, who's, again, at worst, maybe the third best pitcher in the league or something. Flexon, since he missed those 2 months with that broken foot, doesn't necessarily qualify for all the leaderboards, but he's been up there with some of the best. So I think they can expect quite a strong performance from him against a pretty mediocre Giants lineup.
Yeah, people in the chat right now are loving the Deuce and Bears. Flexon, we don't throw out Dan Straley comparisons all that lightly. At least you don't. Maybe I'll see if Samson goes crazy. Maybe I would have back in July. But now, I mean, this is a serious comparison to Dan Straley, and we'll see what he does against the Lotte Giants, who are out of the playoff mix. They were hanging around, pretty much done now. They have Samson, which has been the counterpart to Dan Straley, but nowhere near that level of production. He's pretty much returned to his average form, allowed a home run in 4 of his last 6 starts. His last start was actually pretty good, a shutout against LG in 6 innings, but I don't know, against the Bears on the verge of clinching a playoff spot, I can't imagine he's going to have an easy time facing Jose Miguel Fernandez and the crew.
Yeah, a pretty tough assignment for him. Giants still technically in it, trailing the Bears, though, by 6. I think they may even be able to be eliminated tonight. I think if they lose tonight, I think they're still in it for one more day. But again, with 8 to 10 games left for these teams, basically no shot unless they win out and the Bears lose out. Can't see that happening. Samson, he started the year pretty terribly for the Giants. If you remember, his season debut was delayed because he had to go home because his dad died back in the States. So then he had to re-quarantine, threw off his whole routine, and just did not look good early. He's been decent enough for a while. In 8 of his last 9 starts, he's allowed 3 earned runs or less. He's coming off again 6 shutout innings against the Twins. If you look at his last 4, he's got an ERA of 3.13, 22 strikeouts in 23 innings against just 5 walks. He really was not a strikeout arm for most of the season. Still isn't overall, just a 15.2% strikeout rate. So not someone who's going to really put away too many Bears here, but is looking a little bit better of late. I think there's reason to treat him as significantly better than his 5.24 ERA. I think a lot of that was those early struggles related to just really tough time psychologically, I'm sure. So I don't think that's necessarily who he is, but even the good version of Samson isn't an elite KBO arm by any means. So I think he'd be good enough to give him a chance against a back-end starter for the Bears, but not against Chris Flexon.
All right, so this total is set at 9.5 with these two, one ace and one sometimes an ace, halfway decent starter in Samson. In terms of the scoring in this game, I just noticed something kind of interesting. Recently, these two teams have been scoring almost the same amount of runs, even though they haven't been playing each other. It's been weird. So Saturday, the Bears scored 9, while the Bears scored 8, Giants scored 9. Friday, they both scored 3. Thursday, the Bears scored 4, while the Giants scored 5. Wednesday was different. The Bears put up 16 and Giants only scored 2. But then Tuesday, Bears scored 2, Giants scored 3. So very similar in terms of production outside of Wednesday. Do you think the Bears will just light up Samson and we only see him in 4 2/3 innings while Flexon goes deep? What are we thinking with this total of 9 for this game?
Yeah, Samson's done enough lately that I'm not expecting a huge total from the Bears here. So I think I am going to side the under, even though it's fairly low. I just think Flexon's been so good that I can't see the Giants scoring more than 2 or 3 in this one, maybe 4, but even a 5-4 win for the Bears still hits the under. So I think it's pretty comfortable Bears based on Flexon's dominance, and still going to side to under because you've got one dominant starter and one decent one who's been pretty good lately. I think we're going to see a low-scoring game here. So again, so much talent in that Bears lineup that if you want to pick the over, wouldn't argue too hard.
9.5 is pretty low for that Deuce and Bears offense, but they are facing Samson, who can be good, like we're saying. But the pick here is the Deuce and Bears and the Lotte Giants at under 9.5. Moving on to the Lions and Wyverns game. Two non-playoff teams here. Nothing great. Choy has actually been sneaky good for the Lions. 2 earned runs in his last 18 innings pitched. Joe has also been pretty decent outside 1 6-run blow up. He's been pretty good. Was only a starter since about mid-September. Are we thinking this is another low-scoring game just because these offenses are bad and maybe the pitchers could throw a gem?
Yeah. No Eagles going tonight, so I think we have to devote triple time to the Lions and Wyverns, just to be fair. Two teams have been pretty bad throughout the year. I do think Hyung Choy is probably the best part of this game. He's been more than pretty good lately. In his last 3 starts, an ERA and WHIP both under 1, a .96 ERA and a .86 WHIP in his last 3. And really for most of the year, he's been quite good. He's got 2 7s and an 11 on his game log in terms of runs allowed. But obviously you can't just take away those 3. He did do that. That is part of who he is, that he does that sometimes. But if you just look at the numbers he's given up most of the time, usually he's quite good. All but 2 of his last, 9-10 starts, he's given up 2 or fewer earned runs. He's got the underlying numbers to back it up. He's got a 19.7% strikeout rate, which is about 2-ish ticks above league average, and an 8.7% walk rate, which is, I believe, a hair below league average. So not an ace, but that's a solidly above average starter for sure. 3.69 ERA and 1.29 WHIP on the year while pitching half his games in the most hitter-friendly park in the league. It's a big step forward. He's cut his ERA down from 4.81 last season, so he's trimmed it by well over a run despite scoring rising overall. So pretty strong, impressive season for him. And he's going against quite a weak lineup here. The Wyverns have the Canadian slugger Jamie Romack and Hyung Choy, who's second all-time in homers for the KBO. And Hyung Choy has 6 homers in his last 13 games. So those two could give some trouble, but that's kind of it. They just have not had help outside of those 2, and that's why the Wyverns have fallen from tied for the best record in the league last year to nearly the worst this season. Just no help outside of those 2. So I'd expect a pretty strong game from Hyung Choy here.
Yes, we're looking for Choy on the Lions side, and offensively with the Wyverns, never go when Jamie Romack is one of the biggest sluggers you have on your team. But an interesting thing here is that these 2 pitchers actually just faced off. Their last starts were against each other in the exact same matchup back on the 14th. Lions won 2-1, a pretty low-scoring game. Choy, like you said, had a great start, 7 2/3 innings with just 1 run on 3 hits and 6 strikeouts. Joe, pretty decent. Did go that long, though. Turned out to be more of a bullpen game here. Are we expecting maybe more of the same here outside of Romack and Choy? I don't really think there's any sluggers in this game. You like that under, and you maybe go back with the Lions because of Choy?
I'm just not all that convinced by Youngwoo Joe here. He did give up just 1 earned run his last time, but 3 strikeouts against 4 walks. He only went 4.1 innings. He hasn't gone 5 innings in any of his last 3 starts. He's mostly a reliever, just 6 starts and 28 relief appearances this year. He does have a 3.94 ERA and a 1.31 WHIP as a starter. Both of those are completely solid mid-rotation kind of numbers. But just 13 strikeouts in 29.2 innings, so less than 1 strikeout every 2 innings. Seems to indicate that he's skating by on a good bit of batted ball luck there. Just an 11.1% strikeout rate on the year. Just allows too much contact. Obviously, hasn't necessarily been getting punished for that lately, and the Lions don't have the kind of offense that you'd expect to definitely punish him here, especially because this is not being played at Daegu Samsung Lions Park, which is, again, the most hitter-friendly park in the league. But the Lions don't have nothing. I do mean that correctly as a double negative. They do have something. Jawook Koo is good. He wouldn't necessarily be the best hitter on other teams, but he's a solid player at the heart of their order. And his last 7 games, he's hitting .393 with 3 homers and 12 RBI. Normally not a huge power guy, but showing some power lately. Again, Dong-Yap Kim is a guy who I've been talking about almost every show. Not quite blisteringly hot anymore, but they've got enough talent that unless Youngwoo Jo keeps having that kind of batted ball luck, I would expect the Lions to put up a respectable number here.
Yeah, the Lions are averaging 5 runs a game over their last 3. See what they did last time, just put up 2. We'll have to see. SK been scoring actually quite a bit recently. 5 runs, 4 runs, 7 runs, and then 10 runs. That's a score from each of their last 4 games. The total for this one, the last game on the slate, is 10.5, with the Lions being slight favorites. Where are we going here?
I'm going pretty firmly the Lions. I think they have a better lineup, even if not by a ton. And I like Hyung Choy a lot more than Youngwoo Jo here. The over-under is kind of tricky because, again, I do like Choi. Not a big fan of Joe. I'm going to side the under here because I think Choi is good enough to more or less completely shut down the Wyverns, hold them to 1 or 2. And Joe has been getting the job done well enough lately, even if it's some shaky peripherals. And the Lions don't necessarily have enough bats to just absolutely go off on a shaky pitcher. So I'm leaning under, but that one I think is close.
All right. That's what we're looking at for the complete slate of picks. Only 4 games. No Eagles, unfortunately, to pick against for the top picks here. But without that, we'll see what you can dial up here. This page loads. For our top 3 picks, where are we going to go here, Eric? You like that Bears game? People in the chat here seem to be loving it. Where are we going for the top 3 picks?
Yeah, I think probably Dinos. I think even as number 1, I just think, their lineup's way better than the Tigers on average. And Hyun-Sik Jang, the former Dino, has been quite poor, and it's probably going to be a bullpen game, which is not good news either. Youngie Song is good enough to feel quite confident there. Obviously would have preferred the Dinos entering the game in better form and having more motivation to go all out, but given that they haven't completely clinched yet, I think they'll probably have enough of the regulars in there that they should win this one pretty easily. So that's number 1. I think Bears, number 2, could make a fine case for them being number 1. I think Chris Flexon's been that good lately, and their lineup is solidly better than the Giants. I think Adrian Sampson gives them a chance, the Giants a chance, and if he has his best game of the year, I don't think it's out of the question that he outduels Flexon, but I think it's pretty unlikely. So pretty comfortable Bears number 2 there. For number 3, it's going to be the Lions. I think it's unfortunate 2 teams with absolutely nothing to play for. They're both officially eliminated, which does add some randomness to things in theory. But Hyung Choy has been, again, ERA under 1 in his last 3 starts. He's been a shutdown arm, and it doesn't take much to shut down the Wyverns, while Youngwoo Jo has some pretty shaky peripherals, even despite a decent ERA lately. So I think that makes them number 3 there.
Yeah, Josh is pointing out that they actually might be a pretty good team next year. They bring back the same group and add a big bat, which is all within the realm of possibility. I think maybe we're thinking Yasiel Puig this year, at some point, but unfortunately not. Yeah, those are the top 3 picks: Dinos, Bears, Lions. I was thinking maybe that under, if you're really confident that, Sampson can just hold them to about 4 runs and then Flexon just shuts them out over 8. I think that could be an option, but I agree with also staying away from that Twins and Wiz game. Those are just 2 playoff teams, very competitive, and I could really see it going either way, especially with the pitching. And that's what we got overall. Thank you guys for joining us here. Let Barry point out run support has been horrible, so going with the under there. Yeah, that's what we got, guys. Thank you for tuning in. RotoWire.com/free KBO. We're still having some issues with our stat provider, but we still do have the lineups here if you want to just check out the default versus right-handed pitchers versus left-handed pitchers, please do check it out. It is quite the awesome resource when everything is rolling. So with that, thanks for stopping by. Hopefully see you on Tuesday. Everything's going good.
But Tuesday, you mean Thursday?
By Tuesday, I mean Thursday. That's what I mean. I don't even know the
Classic.
days. Because Tuesday you have not as many KBO games. That's the thing. It's like you don't have all the ones. We want to go Thursday. That's where you get the 4 or 3, however they're doing it. It's crazy. Anyway, thank you guys for sticking around, and check out rotowire.com/free KBO.
Yeah, thanks for coming, everybody.